The shotgun had blown through the door. A hitman shot a dentist in Edgewater, Florida, in broad daytime in the office.
Being a small town, there was a lot of rumor and speculation.
They allege incest, inbreeding.
The attorney was snorting cocaine off toilet seats in a strip club at the very same time that he's representing people in a first-degree murder case.
It sounded like something out of a movie, and now it has come to a real-life drama in Edgewater, the little quiet hometown.
We are in Edgewater, Florida, which is a small coastal town. It's a very literal name. It is right on the edge of the Indian River. It is a community built around life on the water.
It's wonderful here. We get to watch the dolphin, occasionally a big turtle, sometimes a manatee.
It's cute. It is block after block of these ranch homes. It's one of those places that set out to be aesthetically pleasing. And it makes you feel like you're in a Tim Burton movie driving through this town. Look, there are the Edward Scissorhand topiaries right there. He's been here.
I know all my neighbors, and it's still a small town kind of thing, but no place is immune from the evils of the world.
Here in Edgewater, a man named Norman Laslier set up a very successful dentistry office. He worked with his wife, Virginia. She was his office manager. And they built a beautiful life together. They had a huge house, they had a tennis court, yachts, and a big, beautiful family. And then one day in 1991, a masked gunman comes into their office during their lunch break, and all of a sudden, everything that they had built together was gone.
Okay, give me an email. What's the problem, ma'am? Somebody just came here.
Just after 1 o'clock, we received the call at dispatch. We have a shooting at the dentist office in the north end of town.
Ma'am, is the guy that shot him gone? He's gone. I just please send us an ambulance. We need an ambulance. Yeah.
My detectives responded and determined the gentleman that had been shot was the dentist, Norman Laslier. He was bleeding out, and they were taking him to the hospital. They couldn't get any statement from him before he passed. That afternoon, Virginia Laslier was there when the detective arrived, and Emma, who was working in the office. We started getting their statements, and according to Emma, the door opened, somebody with a shotgun and a mask came into the dentist's office, and she was terrified. And Virginia, she described the shooter came in with a shotgun, shot her poor husband, and she tried to grab him as he ran out, but she didn't know who the shooter was.
Norman Laslier's murder in 1991 has remained controversial for the last 3 decades. And so we're going to go talk to one person who has been a constant in this case since the beginning, and that's private investigator Gary McDaniel. Hi, Gary.
Hello.
I'm Hillary.
Hello. My pleasure.
Can you give us a little bit of backstory about the Laslier family?
Norman Laslier was an accomplished dentist. Everyone described Norman as just a sweet, outgoing guy, but he wasn't much of a businessman. And when he married Virginia Laslier, who was a very accomplished bookkeeper, they became a very good team. Her being the business person she was, and him being the technical expert he was. She came into the marriage with 2 children, Jason and Jessica. And Norman liked them so much that he actually adopted them. And later, they had David and Ben. It was a close family.
Yeah.
To anybody that knew them, it was an ideal relationship with husband and wife running a business together and both prospering.
What was the official police report when they got to the scene?
Virginia says she and Norman were going to go to lunch, but Virginia says, I have to pay the bills and so forth. Honey, you go. Norman went to lunch, comes back to his office, and then we know from witnesses that Norman heard a noise. And he went down the hallway to investigate. He sees an intruder with a gun, and he runs in the opposite direction of the intruder. Shotgun blast goes through the door that Norman is slammed behind him and hits him, and he goes down. Virginia jumps up to go to the aid of Norman. She steps into a side hallway with an exit door outside, and she collides with the assailant. He stumbles, she's clawing at him. He gets up and he runs, she looks out the door, and she sees the assailant's car leave.
What exactly does she see?
She describes the assailant by approximate height, approximate weight, olive skin, dark hair with a ponytail, black clothing, black shoes, and even down to the body odor. And she describes the car, Toyota or Saab, possibly blue, and she gives a partial plate. And she said it had a motorcycle escort as the car sped away.
Was it clear from the beginning whether they thought this was an intentional murder or if this was a robbery gone wrong?
Initially, they thought, what burglar would burglarize a place in the broad daylight?
Was there anything missing?
Yes, there was. In the safe, the door was open. There was some volume missing and some gold coins.
What physical evidence did they collect that day?
The Edgewater Police Department brought in Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Their forensics included shotgun residual on the door and obviously the pellets that are found in Norman Lazalier. But they got limited forensic evidence.
Law enforcement was questioning the Lazaliers and questioning anyone who was close to the Lazaliers. My name is David Hendry. I've been practicing criminal defense work for 23 years. Police questioned Stephen Heidel several times. He was an individual who befriended Jason Lazalier, Virginia's son, and was kind of like a butler or kind of a family assistant, living in the house and running errands for the Lazalier family.
Stephen Heidel was always a suit kind of guy, very distinguished. He was a handsome young man. So he convinced Virginia that he had value in Jason's life.
Jason is Virginia's son from her first marriage.
Right. At the time, he was about 19 years of age. He really didn't have his bearings in life. He wasn't really that responsible. Jason was in college, and he had some health issues. I believe he had seizures from time to time. If he didn't take the medication, it was a problem for him. And so Virginia made a deal. Stephen, you can be his roommate. I'll pay you a couple $100s a week. Just make sure he stays on his meds and make sure he stays in school. But there's a whole other side of Stephen Heidel. Heidel was under investigation for bank fraud. After the murder, the police go to Heidel. But he tells the police, I didn't know anything about the murder.
Then there was Kristen Palmieri. She worked in the dental office, would run errands and would do odd jobs, just kind of like hanging on.
Kristen had actually been living part-time in a room at the Lazalier home.
Why?
You have to understand, Virginia was the type that would help an underdog, because Virginia came up out of the mobile home kind of environment. Virginia was trying her best to make a productive employee out of Kristen Palmieri, but Kristen had stolen a couple coins out of the safe and had pawned them. And eventually they terminated her about 7 to 10 days before the murder. Police talked to her. She denied that she was terminated. She in fact told the police she was working that day. She provides that she didn't really see anything. She had taken lunch off that day from work.
She says she was at the dental office that she's been fired from.
Correct. She put herself right in it as an active employee. She says she came back to this turmoil with the ambulance and the police and everybody else.
So does Kristen speak with law enforcement that night? What is it, March 8th?
She has not a whole lot to contribute on March 8th.
Well, 4 days after the shooting, Virginia came into my office and wanted to know if we were making any progress. To me, she didn't look like a bereaving widow. She was well-dressed, made sure I knew she was well-dressed. My impression was that Virginia was intent on being a rich, good-looking woman. And she just wanted to know how quickly we could get this done so her papers could get cleared from the court, talking about that she couldn't get her insurance money until the case was closed.
They looked into the insurance policies, and there were several life insurance policies, and the total was approximately $2 million that would have served as the motive in law enforcement's eyes as to why she would have committed this murder.
We did a background on her, of course. only to find out that she was well known in the bars in the area. She was in the bars, out of the bars, back in the bars, out of the bars, during the night. Virginia was sleeping with a lot of people. She was a player.
So she's been having affairs with these other guys. Do they go and they talk to these other guys?
They do.
And what do those guys
And
say?
they admit and validate there were some affairs.
Uh-huh.
They say she talked about having her husband killed, talked about money.
Okay, so these guys say Virginia offered money to kill her husband.
We located at least 2 boyfriends who gave us information that Virginia was asking them to kill her husband. She promised them $100,000, new cars, whatever. It was just insane.
Did the police believe that any of these guys were the actual shooter?
No.
Seemed to be up front with it. There had no reason for them to lie. And Virginia had everything going for her except she wanted more. And her way to get more was marry a rich man and then get him killed.
So Virginia's situation looks bad, but she obviously was not the gunman. And so once police start looking at her, how do they start unraveling who was under that mask?
There was a patient in the waiting room, and she said, I heard Norman say, Jason, is that you?
Jason is Virginia's son from her first marriage.
Right.
At that point, we didn't know anything other than the word Jason coming up. We didn't know if he was asking for Jason or whether Jason was the shooter. We don't know.
The police knew that Stephen Heidel was a roommate of Jason Lazalier. So the police go talk to Stephen Heidel, and Stephen Heidel's modifying his statement. And he says, I know some things. And what is it you know? He says, Jason told me I'm gonna make a lot of money and I'm gonna do real well. I'm gonna buy that new car I'm looking at. And what else does Heidel tell him? He says, Jason had a shotgun in the house and he cut off the barrel of a shotgun. He says there are shavings from a shotgun on the floor.
They must have been so excited.
Oh, they went right to the apartment with a search warrant and they collected the metal shavings, put it in an evidence bag, and they were all ready.
The detectives put together the statements from witnesses and said, boss, I think Virginia was the one responsible for the killing and Jason was probably the shooter.
Why would Jason kill his father for his mother? What's the reasoning there?
Well, their inference was that there was an unusual relationship between Jason and his mother, and that Jason would do anything for his mother, and both of them would do anything for money.
The whole town just had this great suspicion that she's got to be guilty. There was a lot of rumor and speculation that she was a manipulator, domineering. They painted a very bad picture of her.
In the course of that investigation, there were leaks to the media that were unconscionable. I mean, they were slanderous and they were unsubstantiated.
When Dr. Lazalier was killed, it was very, very big news. It was all over the TV stations. I'm Prevette Bryant, a former courts reporter for the Orlando Sentinel. A current affair reported on an incestuous relationship that Virginia Lazalier and her son Jason had together. It was very shocking for those who looked at them as a perfect family. How could this take place? And that only added fuel to the fire as far as how the story and the plot and the sensationalism of it all, that she hired her own son to kill her husband.
By this time, 4 or 5, 6 days in the investigation, we were pretty sure of who was responsible for the killing. This was not a mystery. Our big problem was we had to prove it. The best way we're going to prove this thing is to have someone tell us what happened.
What information does Stephen Heidel and Kristen Palmieri give to law enforcement?
They've already given 5 to 6 statements that really are not concrete. So the police begin to realize Kristen Palmieri and Stephen Heidel knew more.
Okay.
I thought all 4 of them were deeply involved in this whole scheme. Now Palmieri and Heidel got to thinking, this is not going to go good.
Police corner Heidel and Palmieri and say, y'all have not been truthful. You know more. We need to know it all.
The time is 12:43 hours. We're at the Edgewater Police Department. What I want from you is I want the truth, and I want to know everything that you know.
I still don't. Okay, I can't say that I know Virginia and Jason didn't do it. In my mind, I can say that they did it, but I still don't want to believe it.
Let's stop at this point. I want you to start being a little more knowledgeable like you really are, okay? Because you're not no idiot.
Kristen and Stephen knew that they needed to cooperate with law enforcement, provide law enforcement with whatever information law enforcement wanted in order to obtain convictions against Virginia and Jason.
Has Virginia ever referred to the murder itself of Jason doing the shooting?
She said once that Jason never screwed up this bad before or something like that. And Jason, when I flat out asked him if he did it, he said yes, that he did.
And ultimately, Heidel and Palmieri pointed the finger at Virginia and Jason.
Did Virginia ever at any time come out and say anything about her involvement in the death of Norman, or did you ever hear her?
You mean admit it? She didn't say yes, she just nodded her head.
They decided to tell the authorities, would it help if I told you where the weapons are?
So you've got these two young people working for the Larsleer family that say, you know what? We know where the murder weapon is. Law enforcement, what's their take?
Ooh, bingo, lightning flashes.
Heidel and Palmieri told me they knew where the murder weapon was. I said, well, it's in the next county off of Route 95 in a river.
Palmieri and Heidel told law enforcement that Virginia was controlling them and directing them. Yes, the weapons were inside Virginia's house. And yes, Virginia wanted us to just get rid of them.
We went back to Virginia's, and she had me wipe down a handgun, which I was told was Jason's. Stephen came downstairs, and he had some kind of long garden thing with cement in it.
They mixed up some ready concrete, poured it in, they put the weapons in there, allowed it to harden, put it in the back of their car.
And she said to just go take that and get rid of it. And him and I went for a long drive, and we got rid of it somewhere off of 95.
We got a diver from the local sheriff's department to go into the river, found a piece of cement, brought that back to the detective bureau.
They x-ray it and they find out inside the concrete is a shotgun and a pistol.
Yes, I mean, potentially the murder weapon. They've got everything they need. And what happens next?
They do a search warrant of Virginia's house. They found a pot of concrete. Investigatively, it's the best lead they could have.
Virginia maintained her innocence, but she wouldn't take a lie detector test. I know she thought she could talk anybody out of anything, except she didn't this time.
The reason why I'm questioning you is you've been placed under arrest for the homicide of your father, Norman Larsleer. Do you wish to have an attorney now for this question?
It surprised us that it was Jason, because I didn't think he had the stones to do it. That was just my impression when I first saw him.
Wow, what kind of relationship do you have with your mother?
Mother and son relationship. She's someone I look up to, and she's always been there for me, giving me advice and telling me what to do.
Would you say she's domineering?
No.
Is she the dominant in your relationship with her, or are you a take charge kind of person?
No, I'm not a take charge type person. I like when people tell me what to do, and then I'll do it. I don't make decisions myself very well.
Here you have a woman conspire with her son to kill his stepfather. That was just unheard of. It really began to explode in the media. The murder was the first time this type of sensational story occurred in Edgewater, which is a very small community. And so it took off like wildfire.
The first case is more intricate and involved than anything Hollywood could dream up. It involves drugs and infidelity and bisexuality, conspiracy, murder, and even a butler.
The media kind of hung her up from day one. It was like, oh, you know, we've got to find somebody because this thing just doesn't happen, especially in a small, sleepy town.
I looked at what evidence available to me, which was very little. But on the basics, I never saw this as a hit. Because no hitman would shoot through a door and run away and not know whether or not he hit his target. That's common sense. When I conduct an investigation, I try to find something about the people involved. I found that there was 30-something witnesses that were prepared to testify to various subject matters relevant to the defense of Virginia Lazalier, which included the inconsistent statements by Kristen and Stephen Heidel, and witnesses that would have impeached their veracity. But I'd had a falling out with the defense counsel over some ethical choices that they were making. So I left the investigation the latter part of August. My defense investigation by the time of Virginia Lazalier's trial is fruitful, but a long ways from being complete. And I wrote an extensive memo of the things they needed to do.
The state called these witnesses to testify against Virginia Lazalier, to say, yes, I was having an affair with her, and yes, she was looking to have someone kill her husband. But a lot of people testified that it's just a joke. And they said, we thought that she was just joking around. But the fact that she had put that out there was very damaging.
So during Virginia's trial, the prosecution present her affairs, they present the insurance policy, they present these guns found in concrete, and they present a pot with concrete residue from her home.
That's right. And I think the prosecutors brought in about 18 to 20-something witnesses, but the defense only brought in 2 witnesses, and the testimony lasted maybe an hour.
So Virginia's defense team did not use the information that you had gathered in your investigation. And so what's the verdict?
Guilty of first-degree murder in the state of Florida, carried a death penalty, and she was ultimately sentenced to death.
I'm Virginia Lazalier. I am incarcerated in the Florida Department of Corrections. When they came back saying guilty, I was devastated. And he sentenced me to death. I was taken back to the jail and transported to Broward and began serving a death sentence. I had already lost Norm, and then I lost my family. I never got to see my kids again. I have a strong faith. And I stayed on my knees for the next 18 months.
Jason called me in fear and said, you've got to get me another attorney. And I found a competent attorney I'd worked with before, by the name of William Lasley. And then Lasley and I met as it related to the previous evidence that I'd acquired and a strategy that we should evoke going forward.
And what was that strategy?
My strategy was simple. Call the witnesses. And that's what Bill Lasley decided to do. He called in approximately 25 or 28 witnesses.
So they heard all this information in Jason's trial that they didn't hear in Virginia's.
Right.
What is the outcome of Jason's trial?
Jason is acquitted as the triggerman that allegedly conspired with his mother to kill his stepfather.
We were watching television in the Volusia County Jail, and it interrupted the program to show the footage that he was found not guilty. I immediately jumped up and down and was ecstatic, and I was so happy.
So how does the prosecution explain how Virginia could have hired her son to be a hitman, but a jury has found Jason not guilty of being a hitman.
That's a question of law. It's above my pay grade.
Virginia Larzelier's trial, in my opinion, was a farce. My name is Shirley Bates, and I'm an attorney out of Tallahassee, Florida. Jack Wilkins was Virginia's attorney who represented her in her trial. I really hesitate to call him her attorney because he didn't act like an attorney. He didn't do his job.
They did not use the evidence available to them or the witnesses available to them. And from my perspective, they were guilty of ineffective assistance.
The prosecution even said that she smelled alcohol on Jack Wilkins during the trial. He was supposed to be listening to witness testimony and preparing cross-examinations, and that's really difficult to do if you're drunk or high or both, which he apparently was.
We found witnesses that said that he was basically drinking like a fish, and he was doing drugs. He's doing methamphetamine, he's doing cocaine, he's going through 2-liter bottles of vodka every day, at the very same time that he's representing Virginia Larzalier. I've been doing this post-conviction work for 20 years now. I've never seen anything quite like this case. He's the worst of the worst.
Jack Wilkins was an alcoholic and drug addict. Virginia was deprived of a defense by her own attorneys.
At the time of him representing Virginia Larzalier, a lot of complaints were coming in related to him taking large sums of cash and not really providing proper representation. Jack Wilkins' MO as a criminal defense attorney was to meet with his clients, like in a parking lot, and obtain large amounts of cash, like $15,000, $20,000. And then he would go back to his office and he would tell his bookkeeper, now report that as I received $5,000. So after Virginia's trial, he was convicted of tax fraud. He was convicted of lying to the grand jury. So he's a convicted perjurer, ultimately went to federal prison.
Her attorney was a little less than competent. In one way, I was glad she didn't have Perry Mason. On the other hand, I didn't want it to be thrown out and do the whole thing over again.
We were challenging the conviction and we were challenging the death sentence. One of the most significant failures of trial counsel in this case is there's not one expert consulted by the defense at trial.
He failed to challenge the state's case in any way. No experts to counter their experts, as far as with the weapons and stuff, or even making points to prove that Heidel and Palmieri changed their testimony and how it seemed to evolve in the way that the law enforcement wanted it to evolve.
A couple weeks after the trial, I received a phone call from a juror, and she said, I feel pretty bad about it because we couldn't believe Palmieri, we couldn't believe Heidel, we could not believe either one of them. But if the defense would have given us something to hold on to, we'd have probably acquitted her. That shotgun didn't match any of the forensic evidence at the crime scene. The weapon in the river had a full barrel on it.
The whole thing is that Heidel says Jason sawed off a shotgun in the apartment. You're telling me that the shotgun that was recovered was not sawed off.
Was not sawed off, and in fact was inoperable. So there's no shavings to match the shavings in the apartment.
So the concrete that the two weapons were found in, was that ever traced back to Virginia?
No.
When I deposed Detective Gamel, who was the lead detective on the case, I asked him, what was the most significant piece of evidence against Virginia Larzalier? And he cited the concrete from Virginia Larzalier's house, matched the concrete that encased the weapons in Pellicer Creek. That was very peculiar because he had it wrong, because the FBI report said these concretes are different. These concretes do not match.
The problem is, law enforcement, they're acting on the premise of what Heidel told them, that that's the weapons. That we were summoned to Virginia's house, encased them in concrete, and dumped them in the river within days of the murder. And it's a lie. We brought an algae expert that simply said the guns couldn't have been in the water shortly after the murder, as the witness Palmieri and Heidel say. It could have only been there a day or two. You're dealing in South Florida in brackish water, and there's going to be slime on it. If it's in there for more than 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to find barnacles on it. And it was fresh concrete, which was visually obvious.
So the guns did not go into the water in March, like Kristen and Stephen originally said they did. Those guns could only have been put in the water in early May, right before they led investigators to go scuba dive and pick them up.
That's right.
What do you make of all of that?
It's consistent with the theory that Heidel and Palmieri are framing Virginia and Jason, which begs the question, why?
Palmieri and Heidel, their credibility was zero. And they were such liars that the state admitted in their closing argument that they were obviously lying and that they obviously had beforehand knowledge of this murder.
I went looking to find out what else they knew. As a defense investigator, I wanted to know about the weapons. I discovered weapons were stolen.
Okay, so these are stolen guns. This isn't a gun that Virginia had before, or that Norman had before, or that Jason had before.
Correct. The weapons were stolen from the Oak Ridge gun shop in Orlando.
So if you can figure out who stole those guns, you can figure out who's involved with this shooting.
Exactly. And I gathered a bunch of police reports. The weapons were stolen by a group I referred to as the Harvey Gang, a local group of burglars. From the police reports, I gathered photographs of individuals that were involved in the gun shop burglary. And then I peeled back who were their known associates. I found that those burglars are connected to Heidel and Palmieri. This one, allegedly, was a lover of Stephen Heidel.
Is there any way that Virginia was tied to these guys, or that Jason was tied to these guys?
I explored all of that, and they're not connected to Virginia, and they're not connected to Jason. Then I asked known associates of the Harvey Gang, do you know if they were in the area of Edgewater, Florida on March 8th? And they said, yes. Every year this motorcycle event took place in the area. They go every year, they go there to steal motorcycles and other things, but this time the associates said they came back was really different. They were scared to death.
So the Harvey Gang comes back the day of the murder.
Yes.
Acting all weird.
Correct. And I asked, when they came back from there, did they have any medication? Oh, funny you should mention that. They had a bottle of commercial pills. What about gold coins? Oh yeah, they had gold coins.
So their associates are telling you all of these things.
Correct. So I now know the weapons encased in concrete are connected to a group of burglars, and those burglars are connected to Heidel and Palmieri. I think this was a planned burglary. I believe Kristen and Stephen solicited the Harvey Gang to get the job done. Interesting enough, a bank clerk tells the police that before the murder, she saw Kristen Palmieri circling the block. She was the lookout, and she told them, I can let you in, I can open up the safe, you guys do the rest. But they didn't expect Virginia or Norman or anybody to be there because they routinely went to lunch during the day.
So the prosecutors, they're saying this was a hit made to look like a robbery, and you're saying this was a robbery that accidentally became a murder.
Exactly.
What did Stephen and Kristen stand to gain by pointing the finger at Virginia and Jason?
They could live because the people that actually perpetrated the crime, I think, were very dangerous people. And I'm sure behind the scenes, they made it very clear, if we go down, you go down.
Had anybody else followed up on these leads, they would have arrived at the same place you did.
I did what they did not do because they discounted that information from the onset. Remember, the first things out of Virginia's mouth was, I described the assailant, I described the car, I gave him a partial number. I don't know why they're coming after me. They believed initially, right away, that Virginia's description of the assailant couldn't be true because it was so detailed.
Yeah.
There's nobody that ever got this type of a statement from a witness on a murder. The color of the car, the motorcycles, everything was like a movie she saw. Everything like was fantasized or whatever.
So they never believed her. But did anyone ever corroborate Virginia's story?
Well, in 1994, a TV production team is filming the Norman Lauzalier office in Edgewater. And a young man walks up to them and says, I saw the murderer leave that day. They call me immediately on the phone. I meet this young man by the name of Danny. Danny tells a very solid story. I was on my motorbike near the office.
I just recall seeing a man running out of the door. He seemed to have, dark clothes on, long sleeve, gloves, a mask. Seemed to have a little gun, about a sawed-off shotgun maybe. And he jumped in his car and he took off in a hurry. But that's what caught my eyes because, you're not supposed to be seeing people running out of dentist office with guns.
He says, I was scared. When I saw that guy running with a gun, I dropped that gear down, I revved that engine up, and I got out of there.
Yeah.
Suddenly it hits me. He just confirmed what Virginia thought was a motorcycle escort. Now, in the legal business, we call that newly discovered evidence.
Virginia was convicted based on circumstantial evidence and statements provided by two people who lied, and on the idea that she was some sort of sexual manipulator with nothing to substantiate their claims. And the state still chose to sentence her to death. And now there's a new witness, too.
Our goal in post-conviction was to show that the conviction and the death sentence was unreliable. When your client faces the ultimate penalty of death, you want to uncover anything and everything in your client's background. In this case, we were able to get into Virginia Lauzalier's childhood. Virginia was the oldest of the children in the family. Her father was a monster. He was molesting, sexually violating the entire family. Virginia would step up to protect her sisters and protect her family. How noble to put herself up to protect her younger siblings. And this is crucial to present this type of evidence to a jury, that she had some value as a human being, that she was worthy of living and not being executed at the hands of the state.
This lady has now been in prison for 30 years. She is going to be 70 years old, almost half of her life in prison. How do you not give somebody a new trial?
Thank you so much for having us. There's a lot to dig into in this case. When were you first aware of Virginia's case?
So I came into the case around the end of 2019. It doesn't take much in reviewing to figure out that she didn't get the defense she deserved. There was a lot of media coverage and a lot of this sensationalism, about what a bad person Virginia was. Sex addict, black widow, gold digger, all those names.
As a woman,
right?
What is your assessment of how she was portrayed?
They just look at it different if a woman's sexually active or promiscuous. A man can be, and then he's masculine and he's,
conqueror.
Right, but a woman is.
Right, and they make her out to be an absolute villain.
And it is kind of crazy because they were both cheating.
Really?
Norman Lauzalier. He had outside relationships also, but he's a man.
So was anything made of his affairs?
No, it was not. Men will do what men will do.
What does she do next?
Our goal is eventually to get her conviction overturned. The state's theory was that she conspired with Jason. Mm-hmm. Well, Jason was acquitted. So there's some case law out there that says that can't happen. If your co-conspirator is acquitted of this crime, that you cannot then be convicted of it because who did you conspire with?
Virginia, hi. I'm so happy to see you.
Very nice to meet you.
So, I have to ask you, did you conspire to kill your husband?
No. I never solicited anyone. I never aided anyone. I never abetted anyone.
Was there any part of you that wanted him gone?
No. Norman was a great guy. We were best friends. He's a father of my children. I was very promiscuous. But as long as Norm was okay with what I did, and as long as I was okay with what he did, we didn't think it was anyone else's business. I thought that our private life was our private life, and it's not. I'm sorry that my life choices put me in a position to be found guilty when I'm not. Wipe away the media, innuendos, slander. All I've ever asked is to look at the facts and look at the evidence. I will continue to fight to clear my name.
Is that why you're still fighting?
Yes, that's my goal, and I won't stop fighting until somebody listens.
As a woman, this case and the media firestorm around it makes me very uncomfortable. Virginia did not take the stand. Her defense mounted no defense. It just leaves this big gaping hole for the prosecutor and the media to say whatever they want to say about you. And then it's gospel. It's so much harder to push back against that from a cell. And if she's innocent, what a horrific situation.